In southeastern Iran, at the foothills of the Kerman Mountains, a secret, now known as Jiroft, lay buried beneath the earth for centuries. Its name was absent from history books. No mention in Sumerian tablets, no trace in ancient Persian inscriptions. Yet, in the early 21st century, suddenly, the world began to hear this name, Jiroft. So, why is Jiroft so important? Because the discoveries here had the potential to shake the established order of human history. Until now, Mesopotamia was accepted as the birthplace of civilization. But the artifacts from Jiroft suggested that in this land, too, at the same time, or perhaps even earlier, there may have been an organized society. That is why Jiroft entered the stage of history as a mystery. Think about it. For thousands of years, people lived here, produced, created art, perhaps even spoke their own language. Yet we do not even know their name. All we have are the objects unearthed from excavations. Jiroft is one of history's most silent, yet most striking witnesses. A civilization that does not speak, yet leaves behind a legacy that tells us so much. In this chapter, we will see how Jiroft emerged mysteriously into the world's attention. And in the next, we will uncover how an event in 2001 revealed this secret and announced Jiroft to the world.
In early 2001, the Halil River overflowed. Days of heavy rain struck the nearby villages. The earth slid, mud piled up, crops were ruined. But this disaster would open the door to one of the greatest discoveries in history. When the waters receded, strange objects began to emerge from beneath the soil. Villagers picked them up, not knowing what they were. Some were heavy, greenish stone vessels, some decorated with snakes and dragon-like figures, and others carved with unusual geometric symbols. These were not ordinary, everyday items. To the villagers, these objects were just old pieces of stone. But in reality, they were messages left behind by a society that had lived thousands of years ago. The villagers, however, did not realize their value. Some kept the objects out of curiosity, but most were taken to markets and sold. Some even slipped out of the country through smugglers. Now, imagine for a moment if you lived in that village and found such a vessel in the mud. What would you do? Would you say, "It's just an old stone, useless to me," and sell it? Or would you sense that it carried a secret? At that point, the Iranian government stepped in, because these objects, passing from hand to hand, posed the risk of massive looting. And soon, the eyes of the archaeological world turned to Jiroft. From that moment on, it was no longer about a few stone vessels. It was about the revelation of an entire hidden history beneath Jiroft. In the next chapter, we will see how these discoveries stunned the world. These stone vessels that emerged from the mud looked ordinary to the villagers at first, but once they reached the hands of archaeologists, everyone realized something. They carried a style never seen before. On the vessels were long-bodied creatures resembling dragons. Some showed hybrid figures of humans and animals. Others were decorated with complex geometric signs. All of this meant an iconography not found in Mesopotamia or the Indus Valley. In short, the Jiroft vessels revealed an artistic language outside the known civilizations. What was even more striking was this. The craftsmanship of these vessels was extraordinary. Carving a difficult material like chloride stone requires great skill. This showed that the people of Jiroft were not merely creating art, but mastering advanced craftsmanship. This was not the work of simple villagers. It belonged to an organized community. Because these figures did not repeat the gods of Mesopotamia or the symbols of the Indus Valley, they expressed an entirely new form of narration, and this raised the crucial question: could Jiroft be proof of an independent civilization? That is why the story, which began with just a handful of vessels, soon became headline news around the world, and the Iranian government was forced to intervene officially. When the artifacts first emerged from the mud, villagers did not know their value, but soon they began to be sold in markets and then smuggled abroad. At this point, the Iranian government intervened. After 2001, within a short time, hundreds, perhaps thousands of Jiroft artifacts changed hands. Some appeared in antique shops, others even reached auction houses in Europe and America. The Iranian state took strict measures against this smuggling. Customs inspections were tightened, smugglers were arrested, and artifacts were recovered whenever possible. At the same time, official archaeological teams were dispatched to the region. Without this intervention, much of Jiroft's heritage could have been lost, because artifacts that fall into the black market usually disappear into private collections or become mixed with forgeries, losing their scientific value. What Iran did, in truth, was to make it possible for Jiroft to remain on the stage of history as a civilization. The Iranian government did not stop at protecting the artifacts. It also extended a call to the international archaeological community. Come, let us study Jiroft together. And thus, Jiroft ceased to be a local story and entered the global spotlight. From this point on, archaeologists' interest grew rapidly, because every new piece unearthed in Jiroft carried the potential to rewrite the history books. The first artifacts from Jiroft caught the attention not only of Iranian authorities, but of archaeologists around the world. Because these objects did not fit into the mold of any familiar culture. In Mesopotamia, the depictions were of gods and kings. In the Indus Valley, seals and animal symbols were dominant. But the figures uncovered at Jiroft told a completely different story. Long-bodied creatures, eagle-headed humans, figures wrestling with serpents, none of these directly resembled any known mythology. And this difference sparked a question among archaeologists. Were we opening the door to an entirely unknown, independent civilization? Some tried to explain these artifacts as the influence of Mesopotamia. Perhaps this was a secondary culture, overshadowed by great civilizations, they argued. But others countered, no. Such a unique style and symbolism cannot be coincidence. This must have been a society that developed on its own. This debate forms one of Jiroft's most striking features. Even scholars remain divided over its true status. Now imagine this yourself. If you held an artifact bearing a symbol you had never seen before, would you consider it an echo of a known culture, or the proof of an entirely new civilization? The answer to that question is still unclear. But one thing is certain: the Jiroft artifacts shattered archaeology's old assumptions. And with each new discovery, the debate only grew larger. It was no longer just about a few vessels or figurines. A bigger question loomed. Why Jiroft? Why precisely this region? In the next chapter, we will explore the secrets of this mysterious land. So why Jiroft? Why did this civilization emerge along the banks of the Halil River? The answer lies in the opportunities offered by geography. Jiroft was located in a protected plain, surrounded on three sides by mountains. The Halil River, running through its center, provided water for farming and sustained trade routes. This region stood at the very crossroads of Iran's east-west and north-south trade networks. To the west lay Elam and Mesopotamia, to the east, the Indus Valley, and to the north, Central Asia. In other words, Jiroft was not only an agricultural hub, it was a vital trading nexus. The geographic advantages did not end there. The Halil River Valley was close to valuable raw materials, such as chlorite, used in stone carving. This gave the people of Jiroft power not only in production, but in trade. They processed these resources into valuable goods and then sent them to distant lands. This strategic position allowed them to grow wealthy in a short time. Now, imagine yourself. If you lived in such a land, would you choose to share your wealth with others, or close your borders and build your own power? To understand Jiroft's rise, this question must be considered first, because their position gave them immense opportunities, but also attracted the interest of other civilizations. And it was this interaction that ultimately shaped Jiroft's destiny. Thus, Jiroft stepped onto the stage of history, a land of strength, fertile soil, and trade routes. But the greater question remains: who were the people of this land? What kind of society, what kind of culture did they create?
The people of Jiroft, a society whose name is absent from history books, yet speaks to us through the traces they left behind. We have no king lists, no documents where they wrote their own names, but their artifacts prove they were far more than a simple village community. The fortresses uncovered at the Konar Sandal mounds point to an organized political system. The grave goods revealed the existence of social strata. Some graves were plain, but others contained valuable vessels, ornaments, and symbols. This difference shows that the Jiroft people were not an egalitarian village. They had developed a stratified social structure. There were those who ruled and those who labored. The mastery of chlorite stone vessels proves they had reached an advanced level of craftsmanship. Such fine work could only have come from a sophisticated society. Today, we do not know their true name, but the legacy they left behind tells us that the people of Jiroft, contemporary with Mesopotamia, Elam, and the Indus Valley, were a society that created its own identity.
After asking who the people of Jiroft were, the second great question arises. Were they born of this land, or did they come from elsewhere? According to some archaeologists, Jiroft was entirely the product of local development. The fertile lands of the Halil River made agriculture possible. Agriculture expanded the population and laid the foundations of urban life. Supporters of this view argue, the artistic style of Jiroft is so unique, it could not have been copied from anywhere else. This society must have risen from its own roots. Other researchers, however, see it differently. In their view, Jiroft was a crossroads. Influences from Mesopotamia, goods carried from the Indus Valley, and nomadic groups descending from Central Asia all converged here. If that is true, then Jiroft was not the creation of a single people, but born from the merging of many communities. Like a trading city, a center carrying the traces of multiple cultures. Local or migrant? There is no definitive answer. But one thing is certain. The people of Jiroft, whatever their origin, succeeded in creating their own identity.
What is the surest way to recognize a civilization? Writing. And yet in Jiroft, this is precisely the greatest mystery of all. After 2001, a brick fragment found at Konar Sandal shook the world of archaeology. On it were geometric symbols. Some claimed these resembled Elamite script.
Others even suggested this writing may be older than Mesopotamia itself. But here was the problem. The signs were extremely limited. There were no long texts, no repetitions to allow decipherment. That is why some experts argued these were not writing at all, merely decorative motifs. As for the language of the Jiroft people, we do not know. It might have been related to Proto-Elar. It might have interacted with Mesopotamian languages. Or it might have been entirely independent. But so far, there is no certain proof. This uncertainty remains one of Jiroft's greatest enigmas. If they truly had a writing system, it could shake the very foundations of human history. But if not, then all that remains are symbols carved into stone. Was it writing or ornamentation? Was there a language or none at all? Today the answer is still unknown, but the day it is found, it may become one of the greatest discoveries in history.
As scholars debated Jiroft's identity, two names from ancient texts came to mind: Arata and Marhashi. Arata was a legendary land mentioned in Sumerian tablets. It was described as rich, full of precious stones and artistic treasures. Some researchers proposed that Jiroft could in fact be this legendary Arata. Because the chlorite vessels and ornaments unearthed at Jiroft fit remarkably well with the wealth described in Sumerian tales. Another view identifies Jiroft with the lesser-known Marhashi. Marhashi was thought to be a city-state located east of Elam. Its name appears in Mesopotamian sources, but its precise location has never been found. The finds from Konar Sandal and the surrounding valley geographically match these descriptions. If Jiroft truly was Arata or Marhashi, then we may have uncovered a lost state, once recorded in history, but whose location had been forgotten. If not, then Jiroft must have been the heart of an entirely different civilization, one whose name vanished from memory. Either way, this makes the region unique. Today, there is no definitive proof, but when the legend of Arata, the shadows of Marhashi, and the reality of Jiroft finally converge, history may be rewritten.
One of the most debated questions about Jiroft is this: was it truly an independent civilization, or merely a regional center overshadowed by the great cultures around it? Those who argue for civilization point to its unique artistic style and architectural remains. The fortresses at Konar Sandal signaled an organized political system. The motifs carved into chlorite vessels were unlike anything seen before. All of this suggested that Jiroft had created its own identity. Other researchers, however, remain cautious. In their view, Jiroft was a crossroads between Mesopotamia, Elam, and the Indus Valley. It was not an independent state, but rather a cultural zone where influences converged. Its originality in art, they argue, was simply the natural outcome of this cultural mixture. The truth is, without written sources, no definitive classification can be made. But Jiroft's importance lies beyond any label, for it preserves the traces of one of the earliest organized societies in human history. Civilization or culture, the debate continues. But one thing is certain: Jiroft was one of history's silent yet powerful centers.
So who are the descendants of the Jiroft people today? Could those living on this land now be their direct heirs? Today, the people of Iran's Kerman region have lived in this same geography for thousands of years, but archaeologically, it is impossible to establish an unbroken link with the Jiroft people. Their language has not been deciphered, and they left no written records of their own. Some researchers suggest that the Jiroft people may have been connected to the Elamite civilization. The Elamites are known to have spread west and south. If this is true, then the traces of Jiroft may have merged into Elamite culture. Another view holds that they were an independent people, but gradually blended with surrounding great cultures. Trade with Mesopotamia, connections with the Indus Valley, all of these shaped Jiroft society. Eventually, their distinct identity disappeared, yet their legacy lived on, absorbed into neighboring civilizations. Today, the people of Kerman may still carry faint echoes of these distant ancestors, but there is no community we can definitively point to and say, these are the descendants of Jiroft. The people of Jiroft vanished from history, but their artifacts endure. Even if we forget their name, their identity is not forgotten. For what remains to us today is a silent yet powerful legacy.
And so, the story of Jiroft remains one of the greatest enigmas of ancient history. From the mud of the Halil River to the mysterious fortresses of Konar Sandal, from undeciphered symbols to echoes of forgotten peoples, we have only begun to scratch the surface of this lost world. Was Jiroft truly an independent civilization or a cultural crossroads shaped by Mesopotamia, Elam, and the Indus Valley? Were its people the legendary Arada, the elusive Marhashi, or an entirely different society whose name has vanished forever? The answers remain hidden beneath the soil, but each discovery brings us closer to rewriting history itself. If you want to journey deeper into the mysteries of Jiroft, make sure to subscribe to the channel and follow along for the next episodes, because this is only the beginning, and the next chapter may change everything we thought we knew about the origins of civilization.
In the first chapter, we saw how a flood uncovered strange artifacts that shook the foundations of history. But the real story was only beginning. What lay hidden beneath the mounds of Konar Sandal? Were these just scattered objects, or the ruins of a forgotten city that once rivaled Mesopotamia itself? In this episode, we journey deeper into the excavations to uncover fortresses, temples, and graves that may finally reveal who the people of Jiroft truly were.
The surest way to understand the civilization is to know its language. But in the case of Jiroft, this is precisely where the darkness begins. So far, markings resembling writing have been found in Jiroft. One fragment from Konar Sandal drew particular attention. It bore geometric symbols. Some experts claimed these signs resembled Proto-Elamite script. According to this view, Jiroft could have been one of the earliest centers of writing ever known. Yet others argued these symbols are not a systematic script. They may be mere decoration, because there are no long texts, no repeated signs to analyze. Thus, whether Jiroft truly had writing remains unresolved. As for the spoken language, no firm evidence exists. It could have been related to Proto-Elam, influenced by Mesopotamian tongues, or entirely independent, a language with no trace left today. This uncertainty remains one of Jiroft's greatest enigmas. If a script were ever deciphered, we would know the people's name, their gods, their traditions, their history. But today, all we have are silent symbols. Was it writing or ornamentation? Proto-Elamite or something else entirely? Until the answer is found, the language of Jiroft will remain one of history's greatest mysteries.
To understand the social structure of the Jiroft people, we must first ask, were they a state, a collection of city-states, or simply a confederation of loosely allied tribes? The fortress remains uncovered at Konar Sandal B point directly to the presence of organized authority. Constructing such a massive structure would only have been possible under centralized leadership. The fortress was 2 stories tall and commanded a wide area. On the other hand, the region also contained smaller settlements. This suggests the presence of satellite communities linked to a central hub. In this sense, the evidence also supports a city-state model. The idea of a tribal confederation emerges as well. Findings show that Jiroft society was open to multiple influences. It is possible that different tribes gathered together under shared leadership at certain times, but how permanent such unity was remains unclear. One thing, however, is certain. Jiroft was far more than a simple village community. Their organizational strength placed them on par with the city-states of Mesopotamia. Were they a state, a city-state, or a temporary tribal alliance? The answer is uncertain, but Jiroft's status as an organized society is undeniable.
One of the most important ways to understand a society is to discover who ruled and who belonged to the common people. So how did this distinction appear in Jiroft? The graves provide the strongest clues. Some burials contained only simple vessels and basic items, but others were carefully prepared and filled with wealth. Chloride stone vessels, copper and bronze objects, and even jewelry made of precious stones. This contrast shows that social stratification in Jiroft was clear. Not everyone was equal. One group held much greater power and resources than the rest. This group most likely formed the ruling elite. The fortress remains at Konar Sandal support this picture. The fortress was not only for defense, it must also have served as an administrative center. It was a place where decisions were made, and perhaps where religious and political authority came together. This suggests a strong ruling class in Jiroft. The rulers may have held not only political, but also religious authority, because some ritual symbols are directly associated with power and leadership. The language of art suggests they embodied both worldly and sacred roles. Who were the rulers of Jiroft? We do not know their names, but the traces they left behind make it clear that they commanded great authority over their people.
As important as rulers may be, it is the lives of ordinary people that reveal the true strength of a civilization. So what was daily life like in Jiroft? The people of Jiroft lived by farming. The fertile banks of the Halil River allowed them to cultivate crops and raise livestock. Grain production, together with goat and sheep herding, formed the foundation of everyday life. The villages were built of mud brick houses. Most were single-story dwellings that opened onto small courtyards. Families lived under the same roof, sustaining themselves with household production. Women engaged in weaving and food preparation, while men worked in farming and animal husbandry, a clear division of labor. Among the finds are small household objects and cooking vessels. This shows that the people of Jiroft valued practicality in daily life. But some vessels were decorated, proving that functionality and aesthetics were intertwined even in their simplest routines. Direct evidence of children's lives is rare, but small objects found in graves indicate that they too played a role in the social fabric. This reminds us that Jiroft society was not sustained by elites alone, but by the contributions of every member. Their daily life tells us this. Jiroft was not only the realm of the wealthy, but a civilization built through farming, herding, production, and above all, its people. To understand the structure of any society, we must look at the roles of men and women. So how were these roles shaped among the people of Jiroft? The discoveries from burials show that women held a place just as significant as men. Some female graves contained ornaments, jewelry, and ceremonial objects. This suggests that women were not confined only to domestic life, but may also have played social and even religious roles. Male burials, on the other hand, featured weapons, tools, and objects linked to production. This indicates that men were more involved in external affairs, farming, herding, and defense. But the presence of women in ritual and symbolic context shows that their role was far from ordinary. In artistic depictions, some female figures are associated with fertility and abundance. This suggests that women were not only central to family life, but also had a symbolic place in the belief system of the society. Men, meanwhile, stood out as the protective and productive force. Yet, the archaeological evidence from Jiroft showed that women were not pushed into the background. They were at the very heart of social life. Men and women, though holding different roles, were equally vital to the survival of Jiroft civilization. Without either, this society could not have endured. To glimpse the future of a civilization, we must see how it treats its children. So what was childhood like in Jiroft? The small objects found in graves show that children were indeed part of society. Some child burials contain tiny figurines, possibly toys, or miniature versions of ceremonial objects. These finds suggest that children held symbolic roles in rituals as well. In daily life, education was passed on orally. Farming techniques, artisanal skills, and the community's beliefs were taught directly within the family. Women passed down weaving and household production, while men taught agriculture and herding. This tells us that childhood in Jiroft was not only a period of growth, but also a process of identity formation. Each new generation inherited the knowledge of the previous one, ensuring the continuity of the civilization. Though the archaeological record is limited, we know that children were not invisible in society. Their graves were carefully prepared, and objects were placed alongside them, a sign that they held value in the collective memory. For the people of Jiroft, children were the future. Through them, knowledge, belief, and skills passed from generation to generation, and the civilization endured, carried forward by this silent chain of transmission. For a society to survive, agriculture and trade are not enough. What truly makes it strong are its rules. So how were law and order maintained among the people of Jiroft? No written laws have been found in Jiroft, but the archaeological evidence shows that social order was not random, but followed certain rules. The differences in grave goods reveal social status, which in turn points to invisible rules defining who held which rights. The fortress at Konar Sendal was not only military in function, but also administrative. This indicates that decisions were made by a central authority, so the community must have lived under a legal framework, even if it was oral. Some vessel carvings depict scenes of human-animal struggles or gatherings of groups. These may not have been mere artistic expressions, but symbols of social rules. In other words, the laws may not have been written down, but conveyed through mythology and symbols. For the Jiroft people, order was preserved not only through power, but through rituals and traditions. Shared values functioned as invisible laws, ensuring harmony within the community. Today, we have no law tablets from Jiroft, but the traces they left behind speak clearly of a society that was organized, rule-bound, and hierarchical. One of the ways to understand a civilization is to uncover its beliefs. So, did the people of Jiroft have a religion, and how do we know? So far, no written religious texts have been found in Jiroft, but the graves and objects strongly suggest that this society had a belief system. Vessels, figurines, and ornaments were placed beside the dead. This points to a belief in life after death. Some vessels bear mythological scenes, figures wrestling with serpents, winged creatures, and human-animal hybrids. These were not merely decorations, they must have served as religious symbols and rituals. Structures at Konar Sandal have also been interpreted as ceremonial spaces. Large gatherings were held there, most likely for religious rituals. Fire pits, offering vessels, and orderly layouts support these interpretations. Thus, the beliefs of Jiroft were not expressed through writing, but through symbols and objects. The arrangement of graves and ritual spaces shows a religious system focused on death, fertility, and the powers of nature. We do not know their names, we cannot read their texts, but their artifacts whisper to us. The people of Jiroft were not without faith. They too turned toward the supernatural and pondered life after death.
The clearest way to define a civilization's faith is to know the names of its gods. But in Jiroft, do we have such knowledge? So far, none of the finds from Jiroft contain any names of deities. There are no written records, no temple inscriptions, no tablets praising the gods have been discovered. For this reason, it is impossible to speak with certainty about Jiroft's pantheon. Yet some symbols in the figures carry clear signs of belief. Dragon-like creatures, winged animals, and figures embodying the forces of nature, all these may be indirect evidence of gods. Perhaps the people of Jiroft did not represent their gods by name, but through symbols. They personified the forces of nature, expressing their power through hybrid creatures of humans and animals. Thus, today we have no names, but we do have the language of symbols. Some scholars suggest that these symbols could have links to Elamite or Mesopotamian deities, but without firm evidence, the likelihood remains stronger that Jiroft possessed its own unique belief system. The names of the gods are lost, but the symbols still speak, and these symbols make clear that divine forces held a powerful place in the world of Jiroft.
In Jiroft, we do not know the names of the gods, but the symbols. They whisper of a hidden world of belief. On vessels and stone artifacts, hybrid human-animal figures dominate. Men wrestling with serpents, winged creatures, dragon-like beings. These were not mere works of art, but reflections of deities or mythological powers. In some scenes, a figure clearly triumphs over others. This may point to a divine being representing power and authority. Other depictions highlight natural elements tied to fertility. Together, they suggest that Jiroft's pantheon included both warrior gods and fertility bringers. The diversity in iconography shows we are not dealing with a single god, but a pantheon with different roles. Some protect, some punish, and some symbolize life and fertility. These figures were Jiroft's way of making sense of the universe. This structure resembles Mesopotamia's polytheism, yet Jiroft's symbols carry a distinct visual language. So even if influenced by neighboring cultures, the people of Jiroft must have shaped their own divine order. The names are lost, but the symbols tell the story of Jiroft's pantheon. Gods of power, fertility, nature, and death still live within the faith of this silent civilization.
To understand a civilization's beliefs, we must look at their ritual objects, because these objects make the unseen visible. Many of the chlorite vessels found in Jiroft were not made for ordinary use. The detailed carvings and craftsmanship show that they served ceremonial purposes. Some vessels even depict offering scenes, proving that they were used in religious rituals. The grave goods confirm this interpretation. Objects buried beside the dead were not simply memorials, they were tools believed to be needed in the afterlife. These artifacts reveal how religion was woven into daily existence. Some of the large structures uncovered at Konar Sandal may bear traces of communal ceremonies. Fire pits, altars, and wide gathering spaces suggest that rituals were not individual but collective events. This shows that religious life in Jiroft was strong and organized. Among the ritual objects, animal figurines also appear. This indicates that animals were regarded as sacred and played symbolic roles in ceremonies, perhaps as offerings, perhaps as representations of natural forces. Vessels, figurines, altars, all were instruments of Jiroft's ceremonies, and these silent objects, even after thousands of years, still tell us of their faith.
One of the most fascinating questions about any civilization is how it confronted death. For the people of Jiroft, was death truly an end or the beginning of another life? The graves provide strong clues. The dead were not only buried, but were accompanied by objects. Chlorite vessels, ornaments, figurines. These must have been believed to serve a purpose in the afterlife. This indicates that the Jiroft people held a belief in life beyond death. Some graves were filled with more luxurious items. This suggests a belief that social status continued in the afterlife as well. In other words, the people of Jiroft believed that hierarchy was not limited to this world, but extended beyond death. The presence of animal figurines in burials may point to the idea of sacred beings guiding the dead. Serpents, birds, or dragon-like creatures could have been imagined as companions or protectors on the journey to the other world. These findings prove that Jiroft's belief system was deeply tied not only to daily life, but also to death and what followed. The rituals aimed not to leave the dead alone, but to provide them with symbols for their new journey. For them, death was not an ending, but the start of a new voyage. And that voyage began with the silent objects placed by their side. And so, we have uncovered the traces of the Jiroft people's identity, who they might have been, where they came from, the language they could have spoken, and how their spiritual world was shaped. Today, we do not know their names, but their artifacts tell us this: Jiroft was a silent yet powerful people, emerging from the shadows of history. Now, it is time to ask, how was their society organized? Were they a state? Did they rule through city-states? Or were they bound together as a tribal confederation? In Chapter 3, we will explore the social order and the structure of power in Jiroft. If you have listened this far and want to continue unraveling the mystery of Jiroft with us, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Share your thoughts in the comments. Your perspective is part of this story too. And stay tuned so you don't miss the next chapters. In the first chapters, we uncovered how a flood revealed artifacts long hidden beneath the soil, and how symbols, rituals, and daily life gave us glimpses into Jiroft's mysterious world. But now, the questions grow deeper. Was Jiroft merely a forgotten settlement, or the beating heart of a civilization that rivaled Mesopotamia? In this chapter, we step further into the ruins to explore temples, sacred spaces, and the echoes of rituals that may finally reveal the spiritual soul of Jiroft.
Behind every great civilization stand those who shape belief and guide rituals. So who played this role in Jiroft? Since no written records survive, we cannot directly use the word priest. Yet, the evidence strongly points to the presence of religious leaders. Ritual vessels found in specific areas suggest that collective ceremonies were directed by an authority. The grave goods support this idea. In some burials, ritual objects dominated instead of ordinary items. This implies that those individuals held religious authority in society. Funeral rites, fertility rituals, and offerings to the forces of nature were likely conducted under their guidance. The complexity of Jiroft's symbols in art requires interpreters, a specialized class. These individuals carried religious knowledge and guided society through symbols. Thus, spiritual leadership was also a cornerstone of social order. This religious authority was likely connected to the political elite as well. As in many early civilizations, spiritual and political power often overlapped. Jiroft appears to have been no exception. We do not know their names, but the silent vessels and ceremonial figures still whisper of a class in Jiroft that guided belief and shaped society.
At the heart of every civilization lies production. For Jiroft, the foundation of that production was agriculture and animal husbandry. The lands nourished by the Halil River gave a great advantage to farming. Grains, legumes, and fruit trees were cultivated in these fertile soils. Agriculture not only provided food, but also made the growth of society possible. Animal husbandry was another vital part of daily life. Goats and sheep served as sources of milk and meat, while their wool was used in textiles. Cattle, meanwhile, played a role as working power in farming. This diversity helped the people of Jiroft build a resilient economy. Archaeological finds include grinding stones for processing grain and bone remains linked to herding. These discoveries prove that agriculture and animal husbandry were not merely for survival, but the foundation of social order itself. For the people of Jiroft, fields and herds were more than sources of food. They were the silent power that kept their civilization alive. One of the most striking features that sets Jiroft apart from other societies was its craftsmanship, especially the mastery of stone carving. Hundreds of chlorite stone vessels discovered in Jiroft stand as the strongest proof of this skill. This gray-green stone is extremely hard to work with, yet in the hands of Jiroft's artisans, it was transformed into works of art. Dragon-like creatures, winged figures, and complex geometric patterns were carved onto these vessels. It is clear these objects were not made for ordinary use. Most served ceremonial or symbolic purposes. This shows that artisans were not merely producers, but also played a role in the religious and cultural life of the community. The sophistication of this stone carving was one of the reasons Jiroft became a regional center. Such finely crafted objects were not only made for local use, but also for export to other societies. Thus, craftsmanship became a key element of trade. Alongside stonework, small tools made of copper and bronze have also been found. This proves that the people of Jiroft possessed knowledge not only of stone carving, but of metalworking as well. To hold a vessel from Jiroft in your hands is to hold more than a piece of stone. It is to touch the labor, imagination, and beliefs of artisans who lived thousands of years ago. What makes a civilization strong is not only its farming or craftsmanship. What truly allows it to grow are the trade bonds it forges with its neighbors. And in this respect, Jiroft was no exception. The region of the Halil River formed a natural corridor between east and west. This position made Jiroft a trade bridge between Mesopotamia and the Indus Valley. Among the archaeological finds are carnelian stones and fragments of lapis lazuli, materials used in the Indus Valley. This proves that Jiroft was part of long-distance trade networks. Mesopotamian sources mention Marhashi, which some scholars identify with Jiroft. If true, this means active trade existed between Sumerian city-states and Jiroft. Trade carried not only goods, but also ideas and artistic styles across regions. Through these trade networks, Jiroft's unique styles spread outward, while influences from other civilizations entered in. This mutual exchange transformed Jiroft from a regional hub into an international crossroads. Stone vessels, in particular, are believed to have been exported to distant lands. These vessels served both ritual purposes and as symbols of prestige. In other words, Jiroft's products were not just commodities, they were markers of status. For the people of Jiroft, trade was more than survival. It was the bridge that connected them to the wider world, a bridge that shaped the very identity of their civilization.
The showcase of every civilization is its luxury goods, and in Jiroft, this rule was no different. The chloride stone vessels discovered in excavations were not only functional objects, but also symbols of status. Their carvings were so intricate and refined that they were far too valuable for daily use. Instead, they represented the social position of their owners.
Another highlight of Jiroft's trade was precious stones. Lapis lazuli and carnelian, used in jewelry and ceremonial objects, were markers of both wealth and cultural power. A giraffe vessel or ornament did more than signify wealth. It embodied prestige and even religious authority, for these luxury goods were used in rituals and ceremonial spaces. This is why giraffe products were not merely objects but also symbols. Wealth, status, spiritual power, all were expressed through these luxury items. Today, when we see a giraffe vessel in a museum, we are not only looking at a work of art. In its own time, it was a mark of power and prestige. Its value was both economic and symbolic.
Like every civilization, Jiroft too eventually declined. But what economic forces lay behind its collapse? Archaeological evidence suggests that by the end of the 3rd millennium BCE, Jiroft was losing its strength. The weakening of trade networks was one of the most critical factors. If connections with Mesopotamia or the Indus Valley diminished, Jiroft's economy must have contracted severely. Climate change is another possibility. Shifts in the Halil River's water flow may have reduced agricultural productivity. This decline in farming would have shaken the very foundation of survival, possibly triggering internal instability. Some researchers suggest that economic factors combined with military pressure. If outside groups targeted Jiroft's wealth, its trade and production could have collapsed entirely. In that case, the civilization would have become politically and economically unsustainable. Another possibility lies in the fragility of a luxury-based economy. If Jiroft's strength depended largely on carved stone vessels and valuable goods, a decline in demand for such items could have rapidly destabilized its system. We may never know the exact cause, but no civilization collapses without economic tremors. For Jiroft, the breakdown of its economy may have been the decisive factor in its fall.
One of the clearest reflections of a civilization's identity is its art. So what role did art play in Jiroft? The artifacts discovered show that for the people of Jiroft, art was not mere decoration. It was a form of expression. The figures carved into chlorite stone vessels carried not only aesthetic beauty, but also reflected the community's beliefs and symbols. Art was also present in daily life. Even household items bore decorative elements, proving that ordinary people valued aesthetics. Thus, art was not a luxury reserved for elites, but a value shared across society. Art also served as a medium of communication. In a world where writing has yet to be deciphered, symbols and figures acted as a common language. Through art, the memory of the community was passed on. The most frequent themes in Jiroft art were nature, animals, and mythological beings. These motifs reveal a deep connection between the society, its environment, and its belief system. Art was nourishment, not only for the eye, but for the spirit as well. For the people of Jiroft, art was not a decoration. It was identity, belief, memory. When we look at their works today, we see not only beauty, but the soul of a civilization. When Jiroft is mentioned, the first artifacts that come to mind are the chlorite stone vessels. But what did these vessels truly mean? Chlorite is a difficult material to carve, Yet Jiroft's craftsmen managed to create extraordinarily detailed vessels out of this hard stone. They adorned them with dragon-like creatures, winged figures, and complex geometric motifs. These decorations were not mere ornamentation. They reflected the community's beliefs, rituals, and perhaps even mythological stories. Each vessel carried a narrative of its own. Some vessels bore scenes symbolizing power and authority, while others emphasized fertility and nature. This variety shows that the vessels were not only aesthetic objects, but also held religious and social significance. Chloride vessels also formed a key part of trade. They were exported to distant lands, spreading Jiroft's fame across the region. To own one was not just to possess an artifact, it was a mark of wealth and prestige. Today, chloride vessels sit behind glass cases in museums, but thousands of years ago, they were symbols of power, belief, and identity for the people of Jiroft. Silent witnesses of a civilization, still speaking to us through stone.
One of the most striking details on Jiroft vessels is the presence of mythological scenes and animal figures. These images reveal to us the imagination and belief system of the people. On the vessels, we see humans struggling with serpents, winged creatures, and dragon-like figures. These depictions were not mere decoration. They were narratives of belief and mythology. Each figure carried a symbolic language. Among the animal figures, the serpent held a particularly important place. In some scenes, it appeared as a force challenging humans. This may symbolize the sacredness of natural powers and humanity's struggle against them. Winged beings and dragon-like creatures were not simply fantasies. They were likely symbols of divine powers. Such beings may have represented gods who protected or punished. These mythological scenes in art demonstrate how the Jiroft people perceived the world. The relationship between humans and natural forces lay at the heart of their beliefs. Animals were not only part of daily life, but also of the sacred realm. When we look at these figures, we are able to read the minds of the Jiroft people from thousands of years ago. Their fears, hopes, and beliefs still live on in these silent carvings of stone.
Art is never just an expression of beauty. Throughout history, art has been one of the most powerful tools of authority. In Jiroft, this was no different. The scenes carved on vessels and figurines often reflected power relations. In some depictions, one figure clearly dominated another. These images may symbolize social hierarchy and the authority of rulers. Especially in ritual vessels, the use of complex designs was not only artistic, but also symbolic of reinforced authority. A leader holding such a vessel visibly displayed both religious and political power. This aspect of art reveals how elites in Jiroft expressed themselves. The artifacts represented not only wealth, but also sacred legitimacy. Art, in this sense, was the language of power. This tendency was seen in Mesopotamia and Egypt as well. But what was unique in Jiroft was how the detailed scenes on stone vessels directly symbolized power and authority. Each carving was a visual narrative of social order itself. Today, when we look at these works, we are not only seeing art, but also reading how power was represented thousands of years ago. In Jiroft, art was the hidden face of authority.
Art never emerges in a vacuum. Every civilization interacts with the cultures around it, and the artistic style of Jiroft was no exception. Archaeologists compared the designs on Jiroft vessels with the styles of Mesopotamia and the Indus Valley. Similar figures and techniques were identified. Yet the Jiroft artifacts still managed to preserve their unique style. For example, the human-animal struggles seen in Mesopotamia also appeared on Jiroft vessels. But in Jiroft, these scenes were rendered in a far more detailed, symbolic way. Geometric motifs from the Indus Valley also echoed in Jiroft art, and still, Jiroft's figures reflected a mythological language of their own. This tells us two things. First, Jiroft was influenced by the outside world. Second, it did not simply copy those influences, but filtered them through its own cultural lens. Jiroft's art was therefore both local and universal. Style comparisons also prove that Jiroft was part of regional trade networks. The blending of artistic motifs is evidence of the exchange of goods as well as ideas. Today, when we place these artifacts side by side, we see Mesopotamia's power, the Indus Valley's aesthetics, and Jiroft's unique voice, all converging in one frame. Art connected this people to their neighbors, yet also made them distinct.
Thousands of years ago, the people of Jiroft carved stone vessels and figures, and today they are still speaking to us. But how has this art reached into the modern world? For centuries, Jiroft's artifacts remained hidden. It was only after the flood of 2001 that these objects resurfaced, sending shockwaves through the archaeological community. Art historians noted that their style was unlike Mesopotamia or the Indus, yet equal in sophistication. This elevated Jiroft to a new place in the history of art. Today, Jiroft vessels can be seen in the National Museum of Iran, as well as in several collections worldwide. Each piece captures attention, prompting visitors to ask, could something this refined truly have been made thousands of years ago? The true strength of art lies in its ability to transcend time. Jiroft's works have done exactly that. Figures carved in stone remained silent for centuries, yet today they still inspire wonder and curiosity. Some contemporary artists and designers even draw inspiration from Jiroft's geometric motifs. This shows that their aesthetic language did not die in antiquity, but continues to live on in modern creativity. Jiroft's art does not only shape our view of the past, it also influences the present. And perhaps that is why their voice has never truly disappeared.
The greatest step that defines a civilization is writing. So did Jiroft have any evidence of writing? In the early 2000s, in the Kunar Sandal area, a broken brick was discovered with unusual markings. These symbols resembled neither cuneiform nor Egyptian hieroglyphs. They were made up mostly of geometric lines. Some researchers suggested that these might represent an independent writing system. Iranian archaeologist Yusuf Majidsadeh argued that this script could predate Elamite writing. If true, Jiroft may have developed one of the world's earliest writing traditions. However, this claim remains highly debated in the academic world. The problem is, we only have a single example, and these symbols, still undeciphered, might be true writing
or simply decoration. But their arrangement strongly hints that they may have carried meaning. If writing truly existed in Jiroft, this would place them alongside Mesopotamia and Egypt as one of the earliest inventors of writing, and that would force historians to rewrite the origins of literacy. We cannot speak with certainty today, but that broken brick from Kunar Sandal may well hold the silent beginning of the world's oldest script.
Even if a script remains undeciphered, behind it there must be a language. So what was the language of Jiroft, and what structure did it follow? To this day, no direct evidence of the Jiroft language has been found. No long texts, no decipherable records. But linguists, based on geography and neighboring cultures, have put forward several theories. One theory suggests that the Jiroft people spoke a language related to Proto-Elamite. Regional similarities and shared elements in symbols seem to support this. Another theory argues that they used a completely independent language, one that has left no trace today. This possibility is critical, because if Jiroft truly belonged to an independent language family, then we are talking about the entirely unique voice of a lost civilization. And that would fundamentally reshape the history of world languages. Debates on the structure of the language often focus on the arrangement of symbols. Some recurring marks resemble the grammar patterns of a spoken tongue. But with so little data, this remains speculative. What language did the people of Jiroft speak? We cannot say today, but the silent symbols continue to remind us of a voice long forgotten.
And so, we close the third chapter of Jiroft's mystery. From language debates to ties with Elam, we have seen how this forgotten civilization was far from isolated. It was part of the currents shaping the ancient world. Yet, the questions remain. What was Jiroft's true identity? A rising state? A city-state? Or only a fragile alliance of tribes? The silence of history still lingers. In the next episode, we turn our focus to the heart of power, the political structures of Jiroft. Was it truly a state, a city-state, or only a fragile alliance of tribes? Join us in Episode 4 as we uncover the political soul of this lost civilization. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next step of the journey.
To truly understand a civilization, we must look at how it governed itself, who held power, who obeyed, and how order was maintained. For Jiroft, this question remains one of the greatest mysteries. Was it a centralized state, a city-state system, or only a loose confederation of tribes? The evidence is scattered, from the fortress at Kunar Sandal to the rich and poor burials in the cemeteries. Each clue whispers of hierarchy, authority, and leadership. But the exact shape of Jiroft's political system still lies buried beneath the sands of time. In this chapter, we step into the political heart of Jiroft to uncover how power was built, shared, and perhaps how it was lost.
Elam civilization, one of the oldest powers on the Iranian plateau, rising just east of Mesopotamia. But what kind of ties did Jiroft have with Elam? From the 3rd millennium BCE,
Elam had developed a strong state structure. Centered in Susa, this civilization often engaged in political and commercial relations with Mesopotamia. Archaeological evidence suggests that Jiroft too had connections with Elam. Some vessel styles and symbolic motifs bear striking similarities to Elamite art. In particular, the possible parallels between Proto-Elamite script and Jiroft symbols point to cultural contact between the two civilizations. This may have taken place through trade or through migration movements. Jiroft's link with Elam only enhanced its importance in the region. Some scholars argue that Jiroft may have been Elam's eastern neighbor, or even its ally. But there is no direct proof. The name of Jiroft never appears in Elamite sources. Still, archaeological parallels strongly indicate that the two civilizations were aware of each other. If this connection is true, then Jiroft was not only an independent center, but also a significant player surrounding a major power like Elam. Elam's name may be carved into history, but Jiroft's silent artifacts still whisper of a time when the paths of two civilizations crossed.
Mesopotamia, the land where the world's earliest known civilizations were born. But was there a link between Jiroft and Mesopotamia? Some regions mentioned in Mesopotamian sources may have been connected to Jiroft. In particular, the name Marhashi has been associated by some scholars with the Jiroft region. If this is correct, then the Sumerian city-states and Jiroft were engaged in trade and diplomatic contact. Archaeological finds support this possibility. Certain artifacts discovered in Jiroft carry motifs similar to those of Mesopotamian style. Likewise, some stone objects found in Mesopotamia show signs that they may have originated in Jiroft. This indicates an exchange of goods and ideas between the two civilizations. Links with Mesopotamia prove that Jiroft was more than just a regional center. Any culture able to establish ties with Mesopotamia became more visible on the stage of history. Through this interaction, Jiroft may have strengthened its own identity. These connections were not purely commercial. Mythological and artistic influences likely reached Jiroft as well. But instead of merely copying, Jiroft transformed these influences into its own unique style. The silent vessels and figures of Jiroft may carry echoes of Mesopotamia. Yet at the same time, they inscribed their own distinct voice into history.
Connections with the Indus Valley. To the east, in what is today Pakistan and India, the Indus Valley civilization was rising. But was there a link between Jiroft and this mighty civilization? Archaeological finds suggest that these two centers were connected through trade. Carnelian stones discovered in Jiroft were among the most characteristic products of the Indus Valley. Likewise, evidence shows that lapis lazuli and other precious stones were transported between the two regions. Some small stone objects found in the Indus Valley carry stylistic traits of Jiroft craftsmanship. This suggests not only an exchange of goods, but also of art and ideas. The link between these two civilizations proves that Jiroft was far more than a local power. The Indus Valley was one of the greatest economic centers of its time. For Jiroft to establish ties with such a force made it an essential hub in the regional trade networks. These connections likely took place both by river routes and overland caravans. The passages along the Halil River turned Jiroft into a strategic stop between east and west. Goods bound for the Indus Valley could travel from here as far as Mesopotamia. The silent stone vessels of Jiroft and the shining beads of the Indus met on the same trade routes thousands of years ago.
And this bond wove an invisible network that tied the destinies of the two civilizations together.
Jiroft was not only in contact with the East and the West, but also with the northern steppes of Central Asia. So how were these connections established? Archaeological evidence shows that some objects of Central Asian origin have been discovered in the Jiroft region. Especially in stone and metal craftsmanship, there are examples that recall steppe traditions. This proves that trade routes stretching from north to south were actively in use. Certain animal species bred in Central Asia and stone materials from the steppes may have left their mark on artifacts found in Jiroft. Likewise, Jiroft's chlorite vessels and precious stones may have traveled northward. This mutual exchange created cultural ties between the two regions. When nomadic groups from Central Asia encountered the settled urban culture of Jiroft, two different lifestyles met. This contact was not only economic, but also led to cultural enrichment. The warrior traditions of the steppe and Jiroft's ritual and craftsmanship-based culture came together, influencing one another. This made Jiroft a recognized center not only in the south, but also in the north. In the narrow valleys where Jiroft's vessels were carved, and in the wide steppes where Central Asian horses ran, the same trade networks left their traces thousands of years ago, and this connection formed Jiroft's northern gateway to the world.
One of the best ways to understand a civilization is to examine how its people lived. So, what were the houses and settlement patterns of the Jiroft people like? The excavations at Konar Sandal revealed more than monumental buildings. Small houses, storage areas, and courtyards were also found. These houses were usually built from mud brick, flat-roofed, and simple in design. But this simplicity is key to understanding their social order. Houses were often built close together, clustered around narrow streets and courtyards. This arrangement shows that the Jiroft people lived in tight-knit communities. Families lived side by side, with strong neighborhood ties. The settlement layout also reflected social hierarchy. Some houses were larger and better organized than others. This suggests that wealthier and more influential groups lived in more prominent homes. So, in Jiroft, social differences were visible even in daily life. Beside houses, there were granaries and workshops, showing that daily production was directly tied to living spaces. So, homes were not just for shelter, they were also places of work and production. Behind simple mud brick walls was the daily life of the Jiroft people. Neighborly ties, production, and shared life, all these details still reveal the human face of this civilization.
The smallest but most important unit of any civilization was the family. So what was family structure and social roles like in Jiroft? Archaeological evidence does not directly describe family life, but the layout of houses, grave goods, and everyday objects give us important clues. The presence of multi-room houses suggests that families lived not as small nuclear units, but as extended families. Grandparents, parents, and children may have lived together under the same roof. Burial finds offer insights into gender roles. Jewelry and ornaments found more often in women's graves suggest that women used adornments as status markers in society. Meanwhile, objects resembling weapons in men's graves suggest men had protective or warrior roles. Toys and miniature objects placed in children's burials show the importance given to children. This proves that social order was built not only on adults, but also on the next generation. In daily life, women were likely active in farming and household work, while men took the lead in herding, craftsmanship, and trade. But one thing is certain: both genders were indispensable to maintaining the social structure. shared meals in Jiroft homes, tasks carried out together, children's laughter. All these details carry forward the silent yet vivid fabric of this civilization.
One of the ways to understand the advancement of a society is to look at the status of women within it. So what was the role of women in Jiroft? Grave findings give us important clues. Women's burials often contain jewelry, ornaments, and finely crafted objects. This suggests that women held prestige in social life. In some cases, women's graves contained richer goods than men's, hinting that their social status could have been very high. In the agricultural and production economy, women are believed to have played an active role. They likely went beyond household tasks, contributing to food production, textile work, and preparations for rituals. This shows that they were indispensable to the functioning of society. Some researchers argue that female figures depicted on ritual vessels suggest women also had significant roles in religious life. This indicates that they were active not only in domestic life, but also in the realm of belief and symbolism. The position of women in Jiroft was probably not uniform. Elite women displayed their privileges through luxurious grave goods, while common women were more visible in daily production. But in both cases, women were the backbone of society. Today, we don't know their names, but the silent stone vessels and ornaments still whisper that Jiroft's women played a vital role in shaping this civilization.
The most important factor that determines the future of a civilization is how its children are raised. So how were children raised in Jiroft? Among the archaeological findings are also children's graves. The small objects and figurines placed in these burials prove that children were valued in society. Some graves contained miniature vessels resembling toys. Others were adorned with ornaments. This shows they were important not only for their families, but for the whole community. We have no written evidence regarding education, but it is clear that agriculture, herding, and craftsmanship had to be passed down through generations. This means children from an early age learned work beside their families, growing up as apprentices under masters. Especially trades like stone carving required long years of apprenticeship. This tells us that education in Jiroft was not delivered through formal institutions, but directly through life itself. Children learned not only practical knowledge, but also social values and ritual traditions. In other words, education was both practical and cultural. Play may also have played a significant role in upbringing. The small figurines and miniature vessels found were likely not only ornaments, but also educational tools. To be a child in Jiroft was a journey that began with play, but quickly moved into production and responsibility. They were the future artisans, farmers, and leaders.
For every civilization to survive, it needs a structure that can defend itself. So what was Jiroft's military power like? The remains found at Konar Sandal B point to a massive fortress. This structure, covering about 13 hectares, had high walls and windowed chambers. This shows that Jiroft was not only economically active, but also sought to protect itself militarily. Some weapon fragments discovered by archaeologists, spearheads, and metal tools may have been used in warfare or defense. But we do not know whether these belonged to an organized army. What is certain is that the people of Jiroft were prepared against external threats. There was probably a warrior class. This group may have protected the elites and secured trade routes, playing a role in defending the city. But whether they had a formal standing army like Mesopotamia or more of a militia force remains uncertain.
The mountains surrounding the settlement also provided natural protection. So, Jiroft's security relied not only on its walls, but also on its geography. Today, behind those fortress walls, we do not know how many soldiers once stood guard. But one thing is clear. Jiroft was not only a center of trade and art, but a civilization that knew how to defend itself.
Thousands of years ago, along the banks of the Halil River, a people crafted dazzling stone vessels, shaped trade routes, and disappeared silently without leaving their name in history. Today, what we know about Jiroft is limited, but the artifacts tell us this. These were not just producers, they built a civilization with their own beliefs, art, and social order. Their script remains undeciphered, their names unrecorded in history, yet their figures and symbols still whisper how they saw the world. Was Jiroft truly an independent civilization, or was it a forgotten bridge between Elam, Mesopotamia, and the Indus Valley? The answer to this question still remains a mystery. Perhaps Jiroft carries one of the greatest untold stories in human history, and with every new discovery, we come a little closer to hearing that silent story. If you've joined us on this journey to uncover Jiroft's mystery, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Share your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Jiroft was truly the heart of a lost civilization? See you in the next episode.